Hello, today we're going to be talking about section 9.6 from the algebra textbook, that is the quadratic formula, and the learning target is right here, to solve quadratic equations, and I'm going to include by using the quadratic formula. Because so far, you know of two ways to solve quadratic equations. The first one is by factoring, where we are multiplying the outside terms together, finding the list of factors that add up to the middle, splitting them, factoring by grouping, and then getting our final answer. The other method that we talked about on Tuesday is completing the square. These both serve the exact same purpose to solve quadratic equations. The steps on these can be found in the locker. There are a few notes that Ms. Palmer put up that will show you more specifically how to complete the square on each of them in order to solve the equation. What we're going to talk about today is using a formula that is called the quadratic formula that does the exact same thing as factoring and completing the square, but will give you an answer a different way. Let's assume we're given any quadratic equation that is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. If we have an equation with an x squared, an x, a number by itself set equal to 0, then we can use the quadratic formula. Which is the following. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and this is all being divided by 2a. This right here is the quadratic formula. There are a few songs that are out there on YouTube that will help you memorize them a bit easier, and unfortunately the only way you will be able to know this is by memorizing. I could show you step by step how we are converting from this equation down to the quadratic formula. However, that would be way too tedious and I think completely unnecessary. So here's the formula that I'm asking you to memorize and use every single time. Now let's go into an example on how we will use this formula to solve for a quadratic equation. Let's say we are given an equation that is 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Now the general formula for a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. This is exactly what I had written out earlier before I wrote down the quadratic formula. Now if you match up each of the terms with the letters, we're able to determine that a is equal to 2, b is equal to 3, and c is equal to negative 5. These are the letters that we are going to plug into our quadratic formula. Now I'm going to write it out one more time before I plug everything in. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And instead of using a's, b's, and c's inside this formula, I'm going to substitute them with 2, 3, and negative 5. X equals negative 3 for my b, since it is a negative here, plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times a times c. Make sure I'm extending my radical over every single term. I'm taking this entire thing divided by 2 times a. This is a very long process to solve quadratic equations. If you are not able to factor it, which in this example you are not able to, finding factors of 2 and negative 5 to add up to 3, sometimes it will work, sometimes it doesn't. If we simplify everything underneath the radical, 3 squared becomes 9, and negative 4 times 2 times negative 5 gives us a positive 40. Square root of 9 plus 40. Then my denominator is 2 times 2, which is 4. And we combine everything underneath the radical to get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 4. And this square root of 49 gives us 7, so I'm going to bring this all the way back up here where I have some space. X is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 7 divided by 4. And this is where we are going to split it up into two different equations, since we have one as a plus and another as a minus. The first one I'm going to look at is x equals negative 3 plus 7 divided by 4. And the other one I want to look at is x equals negative 3 minus 7 divided by 4. It's the exact same numbers in our equation, however one of them is plus and the other one is minus. Negative 3 plus 7 becomes a positive 4, and 4 divided by 4 is equal to 1. So one of my solutions is x equals 1. The other solution we get from negative 3 minus 7 to get negative 10 divided by 4. And this is my other solution. So just like with completing the square, and just like with factoring, in most cases we get two solutions. Okay, I'm going to go through one more example problem. And this one's a bit easier. X squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. This is set up in the exact same way that our general formula is, with an ax squared plus bx plus c set equal to 0. Now we can match up all of the terms. To get our a equal to 1, since there is nothing in front of the x squared, it is the same thing as 1. Our b is equal to negative 2, and our c is equal to negative 8. When plugging everything into the quadratic formula, we get x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Reduce everything under the radical. Negative 2 squared becomes a positive 4. And negative 4 times 1 times negative 8 gives me a positive 32. 2 times 1 is 2. Adding these two underneath the radical gives us 36. And the square root of 36 is 6. So we now have two solutions. One of them is using positive. The other one is using negative. 2 plus 6 is 8. Divided by 2 gives us 4. And 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Divided by 2 gives us negative 2. Okay, the quadratic formula is just something that needs to be memorized. And like I said, there are some songs that I know some students in the past have heard or seen on YouTube that helps them memorize it a bit easier. When I was in school, all I did was just memorize it, and it's totally up to you how you choose. But again, this is the third method of solving quadratic equations. If you are more comfortable with factoring, stick with that. If you're more comfortable with completing the square, stick with that. But if you find this is much easier and makes more sense, then please use the quadratic formula. One thing that I would like to say before stopping is that factoring works sometimes, while the quadratic formula works every time. You will always get a solution when you plug into the quadratic formula. Sometimes you may not be able to find factors and it may not work out. Okay, thank you.